Hi, I'm Dave, Director of Cosmia Festival, and welcome to the final author talk and the penultimate event of Cosmia Festival 2020. This is our last author talk that is in partnership with Kirklees Libraries, so we really hope you enjoy it, and I'm going to pass over to Kirsty from the Libraries to tell you what treats we've got in store.
Oh, and we've got a great treat this evening. Good evening. This is the final event, as Dave says, for the library element of this year's festival. They've still got one more event this evening, straight after this one. He'll tell you more about that later. It's been a fantastic week with author events ranging for those for preschool children right through to adults. There have been some fantastic discussions, in particular focusing on climate change, borders and refugees, and just that wonderful question, what would happen if... ... If you missed any of the events, you can still catch them on our Facebook and YouTube channels, just at the Kirklees Libraries, and you can catch up with all the author events that you've missed. So, on to this evening's guest and her wonderfully titled talk, Dystopian Dinosaurs. I feel like it's a mic drop moment, that dystopian dinosaurs. There's nothing on TV that you can watch this evening. There's nothing that you can do this evening that will beat that title, Dystopian Dinosaurs. Awesome. S.M. Wilson, Susan, is not only an author, but is also a full-time nurse. We'll find out more about that later as well. Her novels include the Extinction Trials series, which has this wonderful kind of a description, which is Jurassic Park meets the Hunger Games, which I think, why would you not want to read that book, right? And of course, she's got a new book out, The Infinity Files, as well. I know Susan's going to tell us more about her life and her writing, so we'll hear about that in a minute. But before we start, we just want to let you know that our friends at Reed Bookshop in Home Firth are offering a 20% discount on Susan's books for being part of the Cosmia Festival. They're supporting us wonderfully this year. I'm going to give you a discount code and more information at the end of the broadcast. So keep watching and you'll get that all-important code. I'm thinking Christmas presents, people. I've started saying it now. I've got the third one we've got through the festival. But these would make a fantastic Christmas book for someone's present. Okay, so with us this evening, we've also got Dave from the festival, and we've got Ruby, who is part of our steering group for the Cosmia Festival. And Ruby was actually the person that suggested we get Susan as well. So the great call, Susan. We'll see. Sorry, I'm starting to lose my ability to speak. So it's time to hand over to Susan. And Ruby's going to be asking some questions with her later as well. I think that's it. That's enough for me. Oh, the other thing I was going to mention is if you've got any questions or any comments, please do use live chat and get in touch with us, and we'll incorporate your questions toward the end of the event. Okay, so Susan, welcome to Kirklees and to the Cosmia Festival. Hello.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. I have a very strong Scottish accent, so you'll all need to listen very carefully. And as I get more excited, I talk even quicker. So that will be a bit of a hazard for this event. But I'm really pleased to be here. And I'm really pleased to talk to you about dinosaurs, because let's face it, who doesn't like a dinosaur?
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So we're going to start with Susan's got a kind of a talk for us. We're going to start with that this evening. So I'm just going to get your presentation up on the screen from my side. Here we go. Okie dokes. And I'm going to share the screen like that this evening, I think. So you can't see it yet because I'm faffing. There we go. Oh, I know what I'm done. Sorry. Oh, long week, guys. Long week. We're almost there. Come on. There we go. That's it. Susan. So over to you, Susan. Thank you.
Okay, so you're going to hear a lot of me saying next slide, because that's how we work this, because Kirsty's in charge. So you'll see my name's Susan Wilson, but I write under S.M. Wilson, and you'll see the 3 books I'm talking about tonight, and it's the Extinction Trials series. The first book's just the Extinction Trials, the second book is Exile, and the third book is Rebel. Okay, next slide. So who is S.M. Wilson? So this was a photograph taken in a bookstore in Glasgow, which is the nearest city to me. And it was the first time I'd seen Extinction Trials on the shelf, and I was absolutely delighted. And I made my son take a picture, and I have 2 teenage sons, and you can imagine he was absolutely mortified with his mother in the bookshop shouting, "It's mine, it's mine." However, that was my first spot of one of my books in this series on the shelves. Next slide. Okay, so I'm really a nurse. That's my full-time job. I've always been a nurse. I've always worked full-time. I would love to be a full-time writer, but life doesn't always allow us to do these things. I've been a nurse since I was 17, and I wish I still looked that young and had no lines in my face. However, I've now been a nurse for 30 years and I will be nursing right up until I retire. I have no plans of leaving nursing. Next slide. Okay, so I also write romance books. That's what I started writing. And my name for romance books is Scarlett Wilson, and there's quite a few of them up there. And I have now written 56 books in total, and I've had one of my romance books turned into a Hallmark movie, which made me very excitable. And it just got showed in America last week, Jingle Bell Bride, and I was up till 2 a.m. watching it and tweeting like crazy. So I had my dream come true. I got a book made into a film, but I'm still hanging out for Extinction Trials, and I'll tell you more about that later. Next slide. Okay, so I love young adult books. It's my favourite thing to read. I'm the kind of girl who reads a book a night, and I've been doing that for most of my life. Libraries love me because I'm never away from there. And I've also now started listening to audiobooks, and I'm really taken by that. I didn't think I would like audiobooks, and I adore them. They're absolutely fabulous. I do a bit of travel for my work, so as soon as I'm in the car, I never listen to the radio, I never listen to the news. It's all bad news just now anyway. But what I do listen to is a book and audio, and it's really so enjoyable. So if you've not given an audiobook a try, why don't you try one of them? Okay, next slide. Where did Extinction Trials come from? Okay, so I told you I've got 2 sons, and they're both teenagers. And unfortunately, and I don't know how this happened, but both of my sons are not like their mother. So both of my sons are not avid readers. I was the wee girl who spent all her money in books. That was all she ever did. For some strange reason, my sons didn't inherit my love of reading. And I've bought them every book in the planet. And at one point, my eldest son got very frustrated, and he was like that, "Stop trying to turn me into you, Mum." So that's devastating when you're a complete reader and your children aren't loving it as much as you do. So I asked him what he wanted to read, because I couldn't find him what he wanted to read. And he told me that he wanted to read a young Lara Croft, a young Indiana Jones with dinosaurs. And I thought, I can do that. I had written about maybe 25 romance books by this point, but I had read hundreds of YA books because I just loved them. And I thought, okay, if that's what my son's looking for, let's see if I can do this. So that's where Extinction Trials came from. It was a direct request from my oldest son, and I think he thought I wouldn't do it, but he really could have known better. Okay, next slide. So young Indiana Jones. I actually just watched The Last Crusade yesterday as well, so I'm very stocked up in Harrison Ford right now. Next slide. Okay, so here's the dinosaurs, and this is one of the best scenes ever in Jurassic Park because I just love it. And what is it about dinosaurs? Next slide. This is me in New York in the Museum of Natural History, and you'll remember it because there was a very famous film set in there, Night at the Museum, and the place is absolutely huge. It actually takes quite a bit of time to find the dinosaurs, but they're absolutely fascinating. And although that looks quite empty, that was about the 60th picture we took because I was trying not to have anyone in the background. But that museum is really busy. A good Scottish word for it, it's heaving. It's hundreds of people going through it all the time, all looking at the dinosaurs, all fascinated by them. Next slide. And that's me in Universal Studios hanging about Jurassic Park because why wouldn't I? Everybody else was running to Hogwarts and there's me hanging about at Jurassic Park. Next slide. Okay, so the age-old question, why do we love dinosaurs so much? And these slides are going to come quite quick now. Next slide.
I'm ready.
Okay. They've all been extinct for millions of years. Why do we care about anything that's been away that long and dead that long? And why are we that interested in it? And every time a new fossil gets found or a new bone gets found, we seem to hear about it on the news. And it's quite a strange thing that anybody at any age, whether it's a young toddler or a 5-year-old or a primary one, or someone my age or someone older, you say the word dinosaurs and most people go, oh, what is it? because they want to know. People are generally quite interested in dinosaurs, and it's quite fascinating. Next slide. Okay, we're going to run through how much dinosaurs are on our telly. Let's start with Barney. Next one. The Land Before Time. Now, there's a whole stack of these films, and when my boys were young, they loved them. Next slide. The Good Dinosaurs, a wee bit more modern and up to date, so some of you might be more familiar with that one. Next slide. Ice Age, my personal favourite. Absolutely love the Ice Age movies. Next one. Jurassic Park. What can I say, folks? This is going to come up time and time again for good reason. Next slide. The Lost World, the next one on. Next slide. Jurassic World. They just keep coming. They just won't stop. Next one. Terra Nova. If you've not had the chance to watch this satellite series, it's actually really, really good. And it's one of my favourites of the dinosaur TV series out there. Next slide. Yeah, this is not so good. It's fine, but the special effects aren't quite as good as they are in Terra Nova. Next slide. Land of the Lost. If you just want something daft and stupid, give yourself a bit of Land of the Lost and a bit of Will Ferrell. Next slide. Dinotopia. Now, most of you will be looking at that going, never heard of that. What is it? It's another TV series, and it was actually really, really good as well. So if you've never heard of Dinotopia, I'm pleased to introduce you to it. Go off and have a Google and see if you can find it. Next slide. And there's everybody's favourite, Night at the Museum, with a big T-Rex chasing the bone all around the place. And it's one of the most up-to-date ones. Next slide. Meg. Now, some of you will be too young to have watched Meg. I screamed. So I went to the pictures with my husband and my two kids, and I screamed. I loved Jaws, but Meg is something entirely different. And oh my goodness, yeah. And of course, I've got a megalodon in my book, because how can you write a book about dinosaurs and not put a Meg in it? Next one. Okay. So we seem a little obsessed. Now, if you don't recognise this one, and it's really old, it's called Dinosaurs, funnily enough, this TV series. And it had a really awful last episode, a really sad last episode that destroyed all the fun of the series. But why are we obsessed with dinosaurs? Next one. Okay. Nobody really knows where the first fossil was found. 1676, Robert Plot, an English museum curator, described and drew a picture of something that he thought belonged to a giant man. It was a thigh bone, and that fossil disappeared without a trace, but the surviving drawing suggests it belonged to a megalosaurus, a really big dinosaur. Next one. Okay, what happened next? Now, I want you to pay attention. All the girls in the world, 1822 in England, Mary Ann Mantle and her husband Gideon found large teeth thought to be from an iguana. Mary Ann Mantle was probably one of our first dinosaur experts, but in those days and ages, because she was a woman, she wasn't really allowed to be a dinosaur expert. So if you can find a lot of research about her now, but at the time, she really didn't get the credit that she deserved. In 1841, Richard Owen realised the bones were distinct from any living creature, and he gave us the name dinosaur. He used the term dinosaurio, and it means terrible lizards. So that's where the name dinosaurs came from. Next slide. We learn something new about dinosaurs nearly every week. Next slide. Okay, this book, The Dinosaur Heresies, and it was published quite a long time ago, 1986. And dinosaurs were thought to be cold-blooded and clumsy and quite slow-moving creatures. And this book said that dinosaurs were warm-blooded, they were agile, and they were more like birds than they were lizards. And it caused havoc. It wreaked havoc across all the dinosaur experts, because some agreed and some didn't. Also said that T-Rexes had feathers. Next slide. David Attenborough. A few years ago, there was a huge dinosaur discovered in Argentina, and that's him standing next to the thigh bone. It's the biggest dinosaur skeleton ever to be found, and there was a few skeletons found together, and David Attenborough, our man of the world, went down to watch it getting dug up, and he actually lay down next to the dinosaur thigh bone as well, and it was one of the biggest dinosaurs ever discovered. Next one. So that was the Titanosaur. 37 metres long, roamed the earth 102 million years ago, and the heart weighed as much as 3 people, and it was in Argentina. Next one. That's him lying down next to it. Love it. Next one. Okay, the T-Rex feathers. Everybody gets in a fight about this. The Man and the Dinosaur heresies and other researchers have had numerous fights. T-Rexes are supposed to have some kind of plumage or feathers, and most of the things, dinosaur toys, when I had them as a kid, a T-Rex didn't have anything like feathers on them, and most of the films you'll see, they don't depict T-Rexes like that at all, and that's because it's been a relatively new discovery. And imagine finding out something like that about a creature that's been gone for millions of years. Next slide. This is a Jurassic spider. Isn't it hideous? Can you imagine ever coming across anything like that? I think the slide might make it look a tiny bit bigger than it actually was, but it was still a giant spider, and I can tell you, I would run a million miles. Anything like that. So because I found that picture, I might have decided to put dinosaur spiders in one of the 3 books. I'm not going to tell you what one. All I'm going to tell you is I found that picture and I thought, how can I resist? Next slide. And that's me back with the T-Rex. So we'll just move on. I just like my picture next to the T-Rex. So some books. For every book that you write as an author, you've got to create a world, and you've got to have some beliefs about your world. So how do you create a world for your book? So Jurassic Park you'll know about. If you've not read the book, give it a try. It's written by Michael Crichton. It's absolutely brilliant, and it's a great read. And you'll know that they said that they created a dinosaur by taking resin out of amber, and they created it in a wee lab, and they all grew out their eggs, and they formed Jurassic Park. The other one, the dystopian worlds, and you've been talking about dystopian worlds all week. The Hunger Games is probably the best known, as I learned to throw my book about. It's probably the best known because it's got an absolutely fabulous heroine in it, and everybody's fighting to the death, and there's real stakes there. So it was a terrifying world, and it's one you wouldn't want to be part of. Other examples, and I've not got all the books because I'm a girl who loans her books out to friends and frequently doesn't get them back. So creating a futuristic world for a book. They Both Die at the End is set in a world very like our own, but with modern technology, and there's an app, and it pings one day and tells you you're going to die at some point that day, except you don't know if you're going to die in the next 10 minutes or you're going to live for the next 23 hours. It's a really fascinating story, quite creepy, quite scary, and it's 2 boys in that story that get the app pinging one day, letting them know they're both going to die that day. It's a cracker. A historical one for you, a historical world. This one, My Plain Jane. It's about a famous Jane Eyre, and it gives a whole different slant on the historical life, and it's really interesting. Space, an example for that one, is Illuminae. This is, here, I'm not getting the hang of this at all. Okay, so Illuminae is quite a strange book, and you'll not be able to see it, but I'll flick through it and tell you that it's got weird stuff in it. There you go. Illuminae's got a book with a lot of mixed media in it. So instead of just reading a story from beginning to end, and it's about a space battle and people running away and getting caught, it's got text messages, it's got computer messages, it's got conversations on comms between battleships, it's got computer files in it, it's got some swirls in it, which made my eyes all scaly trying to read them as you follow it round and turn your book round the page to read it. But it's quite a different way for a book to be written, and it's quite interesting. If you get a wee bit bored reading a traditional book, you might want to give Illuminae a try to see if it helps and you like that one any better. A book set in a real world is A Hate You Give. I've loaned that to one of my friends as well. It's a great book set in America, and it's about racial injustice, and it's an absolutely brilliant read, and it's been on the New York bestsellers list for about 2 years now. It's doing really, really well. A magical story, if you want to find a world like that, you could read Caraval. It's about a carnival. It's about two sisters and this mysterious carnival that they both try to get to. And when they get there, they realise things aren't quite what they thought they were going to be. There's 3 books in that series, and it's really, really interesting. And what about another world? If you like legends and retellings, you can try Hunted. There we go. By Megan Spooner, and it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and it's told in just a bit of a different way, which makes it a wee bit more interesting. So these are all books that are all totally different, and they all have world building in their books. When you write a book, you've got to try and build your world, and let me tell you, it's really hard. Next slide. Okay. So every world needs, and these are the things you need to think about. And sometimes you're halfway through the story and think, oops, I forgot about that. So every world has its own rules, its own history, its own climate, its own people, and its own culture. Next one. So a few examples. Let's start with my favourite, Jurassic Park. So John Hammond, absolutely crazy. And we all see that in the film, and it's great to see it. So he's there with Alan and Ellie and Ian Malcolm, and he brings them to see this world, and they can't believe these dinosaurs are walking about. Next slide. Hunger Games. President Snow, the best villain in history. He just appears on screen, looks at you with those eyes, and you're instantly creeped out. You kind of pull back from the screen, you see President Snow, and you know that he absolutely hates Katniss, and he's wanting her to die in the Hunger Games. And thankfully, Katniss is a bit cleverer than that, but Donald Sutherland portrayed a brilliant villain in that story, and it was somebody, he's quite fascinating to watch and fascinating to listen to, and you find yourself drawn in, but you still hate him. Great villain. Next slide. Okay, why do you make up a story like this? And I know you've been talking about climate change and things like that in this week. So let's talk about our Earth. Our Earth started as one big continent, and it was called Pangaea. So it didn't look the way it does now. It was all one piece of land surrounded by sea. Next slide. So we know that eventually the continents divided, and we ended up with the world that we have now. But what if something different had happened? Next slide. Okay, so in my book, we have Earth, but we have a different Earth because it's got 2 continents. One's Pyloria and one's Earthasia. And on these 2 continents, things have evolved completely differently and independently from each other. And none of these 2 continents have had any contact at any point. I mean, I'm the story writer. I can make up whatever I want. Could it work? Probably never in a billion years. But you know what? There are some theories about it. Next slide. Could it happen? There is if you've not heard of them, the Galapagos Islands in the Pacific Ocean have species in that island that haven't appeared anywhere else in the world. And a very famous man called Charles Darwin studied there for his theory of evolution. So if you ever have a Google of the Galapagos Islands, you'll see that they have huge big tortoises that we don't have anywhere else. And it seems that this wee island was cut off from the rest of the planet, and they evolved in a completely different way. So in theory, I'm going to take that and make it a billion times bigger and give myself a dinosaur continent and a human continent. Next slide. So what does every author want in their book? Now, I've asked this before at school, and I get a whole variety of answers. And you could probably think of 100 things. But what I'm going to tell you is, I want you to be really childish here. I want you to take yourself back down to your roots and be quite petty and think, what does every author want in their book? Next slide. It's a map. I love a book when you open and it's got a map at the beginning, and I was determined I was getting a map in my book. At first I was told no, and I didn't like that. And what you can see there is my map drawing skills. And you can see from that my map drawing skills are very questionable. Next slide. This is a map that a very good artist on Etsy made for me. And he made this map from that bit of paper. Can you believe it? So that's what happens when you get a really good person to transform things for you. So once and it's all hand painted, it's absolutely gorgeous. I've got it up in a huge frame in my room. So once he'd made me this map and I told him what dinosaurs I wanted, I just wrote their name and he drew them. I then sent that to my editor at the publishing house and I said, oh, look, isn't it lovely? And she said, oh, you can have a map. You can have a map. Next slide. And that's the one they gave me. And the map changes in every book. So that's the map from book 1 and book 2 and book 3. It goes on and it gets more dinosaurs in it and we move them a bit further down because we couldn't fit them all on one page. Next slide. I'm just laughing because I really am that petty. That's what I get that. So the winner, getting a book cover is a quite traumatic experience because you've put your heart and soul into this story and you want that book cover to shout, look at me, I'm here on the shelf, buy me, pick me up. So we had a few covers for the Extinction Trials. The first one was a kind of pale blue outline of a T-Rex and it was a cliff in the background with 2 figures at the top of the cliff. And it was fine, it was nice, but they decided it looked a bit young. Then we tried another cover and it was green and it had a kind of young Lara Croft jogging through the jungle and she had, it looked like balloons circling around her, but it was actually supposed to be a DNA strand, but it just didn't quite hit the mark. And then I get this one, the Extinction Trials, and it came through, I opened the file and I just sucked in my breath and I absolutely loved it. I just thought, that's it. Because this book's quite creepy, it's quite spooky. It's definitely not for the faint-hearted because these are dinosaurs and they're going to eat people, so be prepared. And I just thought it gave it the tone that exactly I wanted it to have. And then when I got the books, they're shiny and they've got scales embossed in the cover. So they look absolutely beautiful. And I was really, really delighted with the cover I got for Extinction Trials. Next slide. Okay, so I told you I've had a Hallmark movie made. Hallmark, however, don't really do action, adventure, dinosaur movies. But let's be really clear. Since I've wrote this book, it's been in my head all along who I want in the film. And I don't go for the bottom of the pile and I don't go for mediocre. I want The Rock. So I want The Rock to be in my film as Reuben Dawn, as the baddie. I want The Rock. It's got to be him. It can't be anybody else. And I'm a big sci-fi fan as well. So whilst I was writing the story, The Rock was really Darth Vader to me. And I think he would be a spectacular Darth Vader. And if you've seen the film, To All the Boys I've Loved Before, I want Lana Condor to be Storm Chaser. I think she would be brilliant. She would be fierce. That's a very sweet film she's in. I think there's a lot more in her, and I want her to be a kick-ass heroine for me. I love it.
I love how much thought you put into this. This is awesome, this bit.
Don't think about it. Every day I tweet The Rock on a regular basis. Some people would call it stalking, but I tweet him and ask him if he wants to be in my film. He's never replied. And he does these wee windows of 30 minutes, Ask The Rock, and you can believe I'm there. tweet. So I live in hope. You know, God loves a trier. Next slide.
Brilliant.
Okay. So when I was writing this book for my boys, one of the things that I'm really conscious of is that some kids struggle with reading. And in Scotland, for the area I live in, they say that the average adult reading age is around 8. And the red top papers generally write for that age reading range. So as I was writing the Extinction Trials, I was very conscious of words that I chose to put in the book. I wrote lots of short sentences, I wrote lots of short chapters. The chapter was only a bit longer if I get carried away, because I knew from all the research that kids do better with short sentences and short chapters because they get a better sense of achievement and it makes them feel as if they're doing better through a book. And I personally like reading a book with shorter chapters as well, because you just seem to fly through it. The thing about writing about dinosaurs, though, is the names. The names for dinosaurs are appalling. And I thought long and hard, because I did actually think about not having dinosaur names in my book, even though I was writing a dinosaur book. Because look at some of these, they're ridiculous. I mean, duckbill's fine, but I mean, Quetzalcoatlus, I can barely see it. Deinosuchus. I mean, why wouldn't I just write big crocodile? Believe me, I wanted to. But then there's things like Tyrannosaurus Rex. And I actually sat and I tried to write a visual description of what a Tyrannosaurus Rex would look and sound and feel like if you saw that creature. And 2.5 pages later, I thought, Susan, why are you not just writing T-Rex? So it became quite, for some of them, some dinosaurs are really well known. And that's, you write T-Rex and everybody sees it in their head and knows exactly what you're doing. But for some of the other ones, it's obviously not as well known and it becomes more tricky. So I had a real debate about using dinosaur names in my book. I eventually went for it. These are the only difficult or hard words that you will find in any of the Extinction Trials books. You will not ever need a dictionary to find a word from the Extinction Trials, because I have purposely written them to be read by reluctant readers. Brilliant. Next slide. Okay, so what comes next? So what do you do after you've written 3 books about dinosaurs? And you've got people asking you to write a 4th one. So I am a sci-fi freak. I love Star Wars. I love Star Trek. I think I should be Captain Picard's daughter. I don't understand. I wrote an episode of Star Trek once. You should all know that. I wrote an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation where I was Captain Picard's daughter. I want to know why they've never made it. I feel as if they've flung me to the side like an old shoe. I should be on that scene with Jean-Luc Picard. Patrick Stewart was actually in a play in New York when I was there on holiday with my husband and my kids. And of course, there's me hanging about the theatre hoping I can see him. It wasn't really a play that I could take my children to see. So I just had to hang about outside and get my picture taken next to him and Ian McKellen in the play they were doing. So I'm quite intense when it comes to my sci-fi and my Star Trek. So I wanted to write a space book. So I think, did I give you the picture of this? I don't even know if I gave you it, Kirsty. Did I
come on to that? I was just about to say, you do know that Patrick Stewart is from Kirklees. You are aware of our link, and Jodie Richardson at Kirklees as well. Just throwing this in here, you know?
Absolutely. But you know what? I just love him. I just want to hug him. I mean, we can't hug Andy right now in COVID days, but if I saw him in the street, I would run up to him in a heartbeat. Okay, next picture.
Yes.
This is it. This is the Infinity Files, and we had a few covers before we got here as well. This is Ash, my heroine. This book had a different name to begin with, and this is what happens. The Extinction Trials had a different name to begin with as well, and it was horrendous. So I'm really glad they changed it for me. The Infinity Files was called The Library at the End of the Universe. So in this world, there are 4 warring planets, and Ash is a girl who's lost her sister and lost her mum and dad. And all she wants to be is a starfighter pilot, because all she wants to do is get revenge on the people that have killed her family. And she's quite intense. So she goes to try and train at the Star Corporation Academy. And she thinks this is her absolute dream. And she does really, really well. And then she sits her final test and something happens through the final test. And she has to make a decision. And she makes a decision that means she doesn't get picked to be a pilot in the Star Corporation Academy, and she's absolutely gutted, and she thinks she's done everything wrong. And then she gets called and saying she's getting sent somewhere else, and she's getting sent on a wee freighter to a place billions of light years away, and she thinks she's been given the worst job in the world. And when she gets there, she finds out something completely different. and she's in the library at the end of the universe. And in this library are artifacts from all across the universe. And she's been sent there as the guardian, and she finds out she's got a role for life that she didn't sign up for, she didn't ask for. But oh boy, it's really interesting. So there's lots of space adventures, there's lots of villains, there's lots of star battles, and it's just so much fun. You can get away with so much when you're writing about space. You can make up things that you can never believe, and you don't really need to explain how things work, which is really good from my perspective, because it's space and it works, and that's how it happens. I don't need to be a physicist to explain it. I just say, oh, no, in billions of years that'll be what happen and that'll work. So I take a lot of poetic license when I'm writing about space. So the Infinity Files, it was supposed to be out this year, but obviously COVID, so it's out March next year, and I'm just finishing revisions on the second book in the series, and who knows what I'm going to write after that.
Wonderful.
I think
Is that the last slide?
I'm not sure.
Oh, should we click and see?
That's how well prepared I am, Kirsty.
Any questions? Any questions? There we go. Wonderful. Thank you. I think I've just renamed Doctor Who, the actress plays Doctor Who as well. There we go. I actually thinking that's not the right name, is it? Never mind. Anyway, so that was wonderful. We've had some comments coming in. Let's have a look. Right, let's have a look. Oh yes, I think we've had some problems with with the speakers. We had a bit of an echo. I apologise for that. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, there's an echo coming through. I'm not quite sure. One of our speakers, I think. So I apologise if that's been off-putting for anybody. Right, but anyway, it stopped just now. So let's start with some questions. So we're going to pass over to Ruby, who's going to start the questionings off for Susan. But thank you, that was an awesome talk. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, it was
Ruby.
really interesting. Thank you. So when you said you've been writing a lot of books and you've been writing a long time and you've always been reading, when did you first realise you wanted to write stories and not just read them?
Ruby, I wrote my first story when I was 8, and it was called Shirley and the Magic Purse. And Shirley had an army of mice, and these mice all had names beginning with M. And that was a whole page of the story, the army of mice, with all their names beginning with M. I can't even remember how it ended. I do remember I wrote it on, there used to be, before computers were properly a thing, there used to be, printers used to have this really horrible white and kind of green paper in it. And I actually wrote my story on this kind of old printer paper. And my mum actually kept it for years, and I'm sure it finally got thrown out. But that was the very first story I wrote, Shirley and the Magic Purse, age 8. And then I wrote a story when I was about 15, and there used to be a comic in Scotland called The Jackie, and my story was in The Jackie, so that was my claim to fame.
Wow.
Oh, I'm
I've
really
read
impressed
that.
with that, actually. Yeah, I have the Jackie. Okay, wonderful. Can I just ask? You said that you wrote the book and it kind of in response to a request from your son. Did the boys read the books? Have they enjoyed them? I'm dying to know this bit. Did they? Yeah, has this worked?
It worked. My eldest son is actually as good a reader as I am now. He get bitten by the bug, but he's actually quite eclectic taste, I've discovered, when it comes to. So we go into a bookshop and he'll go up and ask the guy behind the counter for a book, and you can see the guy's eyes light up with pure excitement, and it's something I've never heard of. And then my son and this guy will disappear into the shop, and I'm like, he said that's the first time in ages MD's asked him for this author or this book, and I'm like, okay. So my eldest son, he's loving. I sometimes some of the books that I read, I'll give to him to read, but he's moving on to a lot more adult territory. My younger son, he's still reading what I give him, and he's read the Extinction Trials. He loves the Extinction Trials. I've not let him read the space book yet because I don't have it in an actual, like a proper book. I don't have like this, so it would only be in the computer. And he's not the type of kid that would read a book from a screen. He would wears it in his hands.
Brilliant. I'm glad that it worked. That was excellent. So, back to you, Ruby.
So how did you go about researching the dinosaurs and the diseases for the book? Because obviously you're a nurse, so you've dealt with illnesses and things, obviously. But with the researching the dinosaurs, was it museums, Wikipedia, books? How did you go about that?
It was everything. I just inhaled everything I could about dinosaurs. So I had dinosaurs encyclopedias, and then I'd look stuff up. And I like to look for things that people fight about. So I like to look for the kind of feathers and the T-Rexes. And somebody actually messaged me about she didn't like the way my T-Rex walked, and she sent me a link to a video on YouTube that somebody had obviously illustrated where the T-Rex was walking in its toes. And I'm thinking, and you know that way I thought, how do I reply to this? Because I can't reply and say, do you actually think that's real? But so people get quite excited about dinosaurs. I've had lots of messages from dinosaur nerds who want to tell me more stuff about dinosaurs. And do you know what? I just print it all out and I just keep it because I love it. So people are quite passionate. So and I do when I go to a school, we do dinosaur quizzes, and you can always tell the ones that know the answers, and it's real good fun.
Brilliant.
Bit of a dinosaur nerdy talk now.
Oh, I love. You always know. There's always, and then usually one of them tries to argue with you about something, and that is just I love that. That is just what I love.
Yeah, we've had lots of school visits with the boys about the dinosaur books, and I've got people in our family as well that would be those children. Absolutely brilliant. Can we just ask? You put the dinosaurs to one side. I know. We won't panic. Put the dinosaurs just to one side for a sec. One of the things we've been talking to all the authors that we've had on with us this week has been about we're in a very specific situation at the moment, very challenging set of circumstances with lockdown and the pandemic. And we're just wondering whether the experience of living through this period, which is, it's like a post-apocalyptic, it's apocalypse, it's all these things that people have written about in the past. Do you think that you'll be influenced, or will you avoid completely dealing with the pandemic or a pandemic type situation in future books that you write, Susan?
Well, because I'm a nurse, since from the beginning of March, I was working about 12 hours a day, and I didn't have a day off for the first 8 weeks. And I got into a very interesting conversation with my fellow romance writers, and I write medical romance. And I've actually written a plague book before in medical romance. And I wrote one about smallpox, which used to be a terrible disease, and there are only supposed to be 5 specimens of smallpox left in the world, and they're all supposed to be catalogued, and then some get found in some other fridge somewhere. And I had written a book based on smallpox getting out. So I've written my plague book, and when all the other authors were talking about it and they were going to put COVID in their stories, I just said, I'm not doing it. I've done it once. It's very hard to be romantic when people are in big spacesuits, and it doesn't really fit. Plus the fact that I am very, very hopeful that we will get a handle on COVID pretty soon, and it will be a situation that passes. And if you're an author and you write a book, things date your book very, very quickly. So if I put COVID in a book now, it probably wouldn't sell, or people wouldn't be able to relate to it in a couple of years' time. So from an author perspective, I have no plans to put COVID in a book. I have done a kind of plague book before, and do you know what? The plague stuff's actually a really interesting story, but I can't see me putting any of this real life stuff in the book, because most people's experience of COVID has not been good. Yeah. And I write for pleasure, and I'm living and working it every day. I don't want to come home and write it.
No. Thank you.
Now, in these books, the society they live in is really strict and overcrowded, and it's not run well. Is this drawn from actual real life society that you've either witnessed or read about or seen on the news, or is it just completely made up in your head?
For this book, it was just completely made up, and I had to think of what could be such a bad and horrible situation that anybody in their right mind would get in a boat and want to go to a dinosaur continent, because why would you? Really, why would you? So I had to make the situation so horrible, overcrowded, no food, no energy, no power, so bad that people would actually take that chance and do that. And the reason they agree to go, you read books, is because they get made promises about what will be available to them when they come back. So they know they're not going to stay in the island. They're all going with the intention of coming back, but they're all coming back, think they're going to come back to a better life on the land that they currently live. And that's the only reason they go in the first place. So I had to make the world a pretty hideous place to stay in.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm bringing the dinosaurs back in again. So it's a challenging situation, like Ruby just referred to, the kind of the world in which you've got your characters living, and then they go across to the place where it's all dinosaurs. So you picked young people and children to kind of portray in these situations. So I appreciate you writing for young people and children as well. So it makes sense to have them as the kind of main protagonists. But is there any other reason that you might put children and young people through these really quite challenging situations rather than making an adult book or putting adults in instead?
I think quite often that children and young adults particularly are much more resilient than we give them credit for. And I often think, as somebody had said the horrible statement to me once about, oh, you're writing a young adult book, you'll need to dumb it down. And I said, actually, I'll need to level it up, because I'm like that. Most of them are much cleverer than I am. I said, so, there's no dumbing down for a young adult book. A lot of some of the best people you'll ever meet in your life are some young adults. I've met some young adults who are in very vulnerable positions, that are carers for their family, and they are the most admirable people I've ever met. So I think that young people don't get credit. I absolutely thought they would handle a situation 100 times better than an adult. And I think as well that if I was going to get stuck in the dinosaur continent, that's who I'd want to be with, the young adults, instead of people like me. I think I'd have a better chance of survival with them.
Well, yes, we can't give anything away, can we? But yes, absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you. Ruby?
Now, with the conditions that the city that Storm Chaser and Lincoln live in, do you think you would have been able to run it differently? So if you were in charge of the government there, is there anything you would have done differently, or do you think you would have just been a bit lost, like the government were not controlling it very well?
I think the government in this book are hideous people who look after themselves and don't really care about the rest of the population. And I think you would have some people in our very current environment thinking that that's entirely true, and being reflected by some of the things that are happening, and particularly in the last few weeks. So although I wrote this book, The Extinction Trials, I wrote it now 5 years ago. I think we always have that in our head about people are actually only out to look after themselves, and they don't really care much about the population round about them. So I think that's a message that comes through quite often in a lot of fiction, whether it's adult or young adult fiction. And I think it's probably the thing most of us relate to. So that's why I just went with it, that the people at the Parliament are actually looking after themselves okay, but it's the rest of the population they just don't care about.
So to follow on to that question then, quite neatly, we also been asking about when you write. I mean, you mentioned that you write to entertain, and it sounds like, I think in part you write books that you'll enjoy reading, I think, from the sound of it as well, which I think is a lovely way to write and a lovely thing to think about. But do you have at the back of your head at all that you might like to inspire thought or action, or just inspire people to have to just reflect on the situation that they're living in, like you just described? Do you have that in the back of your head as well when you're writing at all?
Do you know, I'm a very bad person, but I don't, because I think because of my day job and the things that happen at work in my day job, I write for a very different reason. So there's some really great young adult books. I mentioned one of them earlier, The Hate You Give by Angie Thompson. And the other one that was really good is a book called Sadie, which I read last year, and it really, really stayed with me, by another young adult author. And they've got really important and clear messages in them. And my books don't have those big kind of messages and takeaways and things that you will have to mull over for days and days, and then maybe go back and read a bit in the book again about. I just write for pure, crazy entertainment. So my book is the crazy, daft Jurassic Park film that you would watch in the telly, and you don't learn the big messages of life from. And I can be absolutely upfront and tell you that that's not the type of fiction that I write, because I don't think I could do it as well as the people who are currently doing it. And I think you've got to write to what your strengths are, and I think that's what my strengths lie in, the crazy daft stuff, and other people's strengths lie in the really important message stuff.
I think you might cover some of the stuff without realizing it, because I mean, I've read some reviews online, but I think we've all picked out things when we've read these books that kind of resonated with things that are happening now, or things that potentially could happen as a result of the situation we're in now. So I think you might be doing a slight disservice there. I think you're doing both. They're very entertaining, very, very, very page turning, but I think there is something more there, Susan.
Thank you.
Ruby?
Now, just on, which character did you find easiest to write about, and did you base them on people around you, or are they just complete fiction?
Oh, how hard do you think this is going to be to answer? That would be The Rock, Reuben Dawn. And there is another character in book 2 and book 3 who is secretly Yoda from Star Wars, and I don't make any pretense about it. You know, I've got Darth Vader in one book. I'm definitely having Yoda in another. So, yeah, I think because I had pictures of The Rock floating about my head the whole time I was writing him, I found him the easiest to write about. And you know, he's a baddie to begin with, but you know, people can always repent and get a bit better. And you know, if I'm going to try and get The Rock to star in my film, I have to make sure he's got some kind of redemption arc anyway. So that's why it's in there. All for The Rock, all to get him to star in the film.
I'm a little worried, Susan, if the camera panned just slightly, that we might see like a little kind of shrine to The Rock in your flat somewhere. I'm getting a little worried now. Little worried.
that and Captain Picard, the life size cut out. That's the two awards, The Rock and Captain Picard.
Oh, nervous giggles. Where do we go from here? So, brilliant. We've had some comments coming through. Yeah, I think we've got someone called Mo who's some really great comments coming through. Mo has just been saying that general agreement that young people's books are far better than many adult ones, and I think that's something that absolutely I'd agree with. I think I will say that some of the most intelligent writing and the things that are thought-provoking and entertaining come through the young adult world far more so than a lot of our adult books that are being written at the moment. I think there's some really intelligent writing for children. We've had really good examples of that over this past week. Absolutely cool. And then Mo's also just said, some of the recommendations. So yeah, we'll absolutely do this, Mo. We'll pull out the recommendations that have been made during the week by different authors and make sure they're available for you on the website. Not a problem. So not a problem. Okay, I should share those. Ruby, have you got another question,
huh? Which character do you most identify with personally? Like, which one is more of a reflection of you, if there are any?
Do you know, Ruby, I would love to look you straight in the eye and tell you that I'm Storm Chaser, because I think she's everything that I would like to be, and I know I'm not, because I can tell you right now, if we get stuck in the dinosaur continent, I'm the dinosaur bait. I can't climb a cliff. I can barely swim. I certainly can't run. So you three are safe. The dinosaur's going to be busy eating me while you three escape. I would love to be like Storm Chaser. So she's kind of my dream heroine. And if I could pretend to be her, I would. But the real life sad fact is, not in a million years could I ever get anywhere close to the fun and the skill set that she has. But in my dreams, maybe I can do that. So in my dreams, I would like to be Storm Chaser, but in the reality, I know I'm the dinosaur bait.
So oh Lord. Yes, I think, to be honest, I think a lot of us will be there next year. We do a lot of work with young people about kind of encourage them to write and to use writing as a way of just either entertain themselves, as friends, or as a kind of well-being activity as well. You know, just dealing with stuff by writing it down. But also we encourage young people that are thinking about wanting to become writers themselves. You know, so we always ask: have you got any top tips or things that you've learned along the way that you would pass on as kind of learned wisdom to young people who are being aspiring writers?
There are certain tips that are really easy, but I think the most important thing I should say is what works for one person doesn't work for another, and everybody's got to find their own path. Because the first thing I would say is read as much as you can. I find it easy to read. I don't struggle with reading, and I access books in lots of ways. So I buy books, I get them from the library, I listen in audio, and I read them on my Kindle app as well. But for some people, it's not as easy as that. So the first thing about writing is you learn from other people. You take things in even though you don't realise it when you're reading other materials. But I would say to other people that want to write as well, I read fiction because I love fiction, but there's so much more out there. So there's lots of non-fiction, there's lots of how-to books, there's lots of encyclopedia-style books, there's lots of Wikipedia stuff, stuff. There's newspapers, there's magazines, there's mangas. Anything is reading. And if you read whatever your bag is, that's fine. Just because somebody says you can't be a writer if you don't read novels and you've not read any of the classics, none of that matters. You read what you enjoy and what you take in well, and what you want to write, or what you would like to be part of. I think as well that media is very different this era that we're in. You know, there's some of the stuff I watch is I'll watch a lot of booktubers, and I watch a lot of YouTube videos, and I absolutely love them. And I love that content, and I love seeing all the faces and the personalities out there. And I love that some people love things and some people absolutely hate them. And you can get both sides of the story. And then you go and watch somebody give something a 5-star review, and then you go and watch somebody give something a 1-star review. And I love the interaction. And that was never there when I was a girl. And I just think that things are so much fun that way. There's also the world of Twitter, which can be a very strange world. Some days it's great, and some days it's a place that you wouldn't touch with a barge pole. And then I love Instagram and the pictures and the posts that people put up. And I'm fascinated by TikTok. I'm new to TikTok. I am very late to the TikTok party, and I could watch people dancing in TikTok all day. So there's lots of media out there, and I think just because I tell you to do something, you've got to find your own path. I write every day, and I find that works for me, and it's because I work full time and I've got other commitments. If I write 1,000 words every day, I can do it. I can do that in half an hour. It keeps me on track for all the books that I've got under project and under contract. But other people can't work like that at all. So just because I say, all right, every day, other people would say, I'll kill you if you tell me that. I hate that. Don't tell me that. So I think you've got to find your own path, and you've got to do what works best for you. And I write every day and I read every day, and that's what works for me.
Brilliant. It's a great answer. Thank you. Thank you. Ruby, are there any more on your list?
Which continent was your favourite to write about? Was it the one where you had to make up all the rules and the awful government and the crazy situation? Or was it one where you had to kind of stick to the facts of the dinosaurs and just,
I couldn't wait to get off that continent. I just wanted to spend my whole time in the dinosaur continent. And in the second book, there's quite a bit of stuff about the bad world and the parliament and everything. And I couldn't wait to get in the boat and get to Pyloria and get in amongst the dinosaurs to see which character was going to get eaten that time round. Because it's like everybody's not a Star Trek fan, but if you watch an episode of Star Trek and there's an unknown ensign sitting in the front with a red jumper, you know they're getting killed and they're going to die in that episode. So I would sit and write my book and I'm like, who's my ensign today? Who's going to what dinosaur? It was great fun. I'm flicking through a dinosaur encyclopedia and saying, what creature will eat today? I've honestly never had so much fun writing a book. It was just great. So I wanted to hang out on the dinosaur continent all the time.
I've never heard an author talk about having so much fun in their writing as I've had this evening, Susan. No, I think I've never. It's been wonderful. Really, really lovely to hear.
And kids love it. I mean, people say, "Oh, you can't put gore in a kid's book." Oh my goodness, people, why did you know that when you opened in half? So the school visits are the most fun. Well, and then they tell you with great description how they would have liked that character to die. So, for next time.
Some of my favourite scenes are where the horrible people don't make it.
But it's good fun because you want something to happen to them. That's why we make them bad, so they can get chopped in half. And in the book, that's why they're there. It's good fun. Honestly, this is why I do it.
It's not a
Brilliant.
dinosaur book if no one gets ripped apart.
No. I just remember the arm. There's an arm bit in the first book that I remember very, very vividly. Read the book, people. Read the book. Wonderful. Right. Okay. We're coming to the end. Has anyone got a burning question? One last question for Susan that they want to ask? Anything else coming through? Ruby, have you got a really good one on your list that you haven't got to?
What's your favourite dinosaur?
Oh, always a T-Rex, without a shadow of a doubt. It's got to be the big bad boy who could chop me in half with one bite. It's got to be the T-Rex. And I love all the stuff you find out. Like, if you see a T-Rex, like, if I leave my house right now and there's a T-Rex in my front garden, if I stay really still, it might not get me, because it's the vision of the T-Rex was the thing. If it could track movement, then it would get you. So if I'd stayed really still, it might not get me. And that's the kind of stuff that I just loved and just inhaled and thought, this is so much fun. So it's always going to be the Raptors were a close second, but I know that we all associate the stuff in the Raptors with the Jurassic Park movie that we're seeing, but raptors are really the size of chickens, which isn't as exciting and isn't as fun. And when I was writing the book, I had to do the debate: do I do it as an accurate description, or do I do it as the Jurassic Park description that everybody now thinks a raptor is? And I decided at the end of the day, the book was for kids. I'll just go with the Jurassic Park description and make them 6 foot when actually they're not even higher than your knee. So, these things that you've got to take as you're writing a story and decide what's the way to go. Raptors can be a close second, but definitely always a T-Rex.
Brilliant. This has been an absolute treat, Susan. Absolute treat. A wonderful, wonderful end to the Cosmia Festival. It's an absolute treat. It's been so much fun. So much fun. Hearing about the enthusiasm and the passion and the fun that you have when you're writing as well. Absolute, just brilliant. Brilliant end. Brilliant end. To a very rainy, miserable day here in West Yorkshire. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Does anyone else want to say anything before I start to wrap up? We good? Ruby?
I think we're all good.
Yeah. Wonderful. So, like I say, Ruby was the person who suggested we try to get SM Wilson, Susan Wilson, as part of the festival. I'm so glad, Ruby, that you made that suggestion. Wonderful suggestion. Brilliant. So, Susan, proper thank you so much. It's been an absolute treat, absolute blast. Thank you so much. And we understood and heard every single word. I've got to thank you for coming in from Facebook. It's been beautiful. Lovely to hear. So that's our last library author event as part of the Cosmia Festival. Like I said at the start, if you have missed any of the other ones, they are still available on our YouTube and our Facebook account. Go and have to check them out. There are some other awesome authors as well. Very, very different all the way through. So please do go check them out. Now let's mention the books. Let me just get this up. So, like I mentioned at the beginning, Read Bookshop in Home Firth are offering a 20% discount on Susan's books as part of the Cosmia Festival, and the discount's running up until December, so plenty of time. I'll come on to how else you can get in contact with them, because things have changed slightly from when we started this message at the beginning of the festival. So Read is actually next door to the library in Home Firth, so you can go and visit them. If you can't get to Home Firth, you can email them, read.homefirth@gmail.com. If you've emailed them and you've got your discount code, which I'm going to give you in one moment, you'll be able to get in contact with them that way, or they're quite happy for you to get in contact over social media. So you could tweet them at read_homefirth. This video will be up for a while, so you can be able to go and see it to get the details again if you missed them there. And the code, the all-important code that you need is, let me just find it. There it is. So 20% discount code, again, Christmas present. For Susan's book is CFSMW20. That's
Ready? SMW20. Okay, and that gives you 20% discount off. If you don't want to buy the books, then please, we've got ebooks and we've got books in our libraries. Go and visit your local Kirklees libraries to borrow them instead. Brilliant. Okay, so that's it for this year's library events at Cosmia. It's been great. Like I say, you can go and watch the previous episode. I just want to say a quick thank you to all the library team who worked so hard to bring these events to you. So we've got Kev, Hannah, Ambreen, Linda and Janice, who've all been front and centre to do the sessions for us. And of course, absolute special thanks to Ruby, our special steering group member, who was responsible for half of this year's lineup. She did some really corking good ideas. Thank you very much, Ruby. And thank you for hosting 2 of the sessions as well. It's been brilliant. Okay, so I think that's it. Dave, did you want to do a quick plug for the event that runs after this one?
Well, firstly, I will say huge thanks to Susan for this evening. It's been really great. And to all the team at Kirklees Libraries for putting on the Author Talks as part of the festival. It's been a brilliant edition. And as Kirsty said, we've heard from some amazing authors, all very different, but all really interesting in their own ways. So huge thanks from the team at Cosmia for that. We have got one more event coming up, which we have invited 4 writers to basically just give us an hour of whimsy, which is starting in about 25 minutes on our YouTube channel and our Twitter page. You can find them on there streaming from Upper State. So we've got RJ Barker and Kit Power, who do a monthly thing called Writopolis, normally in the shadows of Discord. I've drawn them into the light of video. So and they've invited Adrian Tchaikovsky and Jen Williams, who are going to basically talk about lots of cool stuff for an hour, and I'm just going to leave them to it. So tune in if that sounds interesting to you, and if not, we'll see you for Cosmia next year.
Wonderful. I've just had a quick message from Reed just to say that open for click, collect, post and deliveries after Wednesday. Thanks for the events. There we go. Just so we're giving a quick update.
Yes,
okay.
Huge
Wonderful.
Thanks to Reed, I should have said, for that offer as well. Incredibly generous, so please take advantage of it.
Absolutely. Okay, right, we could all say goodbye. Thank you very much again, Susan, and good night, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.